The main example that we used last time was this coal-fired power plant. We saw that without the externalities being taken into account, we would end up with our market equilibrium back here at the 300 megawatt power plant level. This would just match the value to the buyers with the cost to the sellers at that 300th megawatt. And so absent any externalities, this would have been efficient. But it's not, because we've got these additional externalities, these additional costs from the pollution that are going to be borne by someone else who's not a party to this decision. Once we take into account those costs by adding on a couple of cents to deal with those externalities, to represent the cost of those externalities, we got up to this marginal social cost curve, and so our socially optimal level of production was right here. A 100 megawatt power plant was the one that just balanced the cost to the producer, the cost to the rest of society, and the benefit to the buyer of this electricity. This socially optimal level of production, this 100 megawatt power plant, would be efficient. It would maximize the economic surplus available in this market. Well, so how could we get there? How could we write a law that says you've got to make this size power plant, not this size power plant? Well, when you phrase it like that, it's actually pretty easy, right? You just write a law that says you can't build a power plant over 100 megawatts. That would be just fine. Problem solved. We can end the lecture early, right? Well, no, not really. Because think about everything that the government needs in order to write this law. They need to know where this socially optimal point is. Well, what do they need for that? They need the locations of the demand curve. That one you could probably say is pretty reasonable. The government could know the price of power pretty reliably. The firm's supply curve. Well, that's a bit of a stretch, right? A lot of the time, businesses don't even accurately know their entire supply curve. They often will only know values on their supply curve that are pretty close to the choices that they're going to be making, pretty close to that market equilibrium. This is pretty far away from that. So if the firm is not even guaranteed to know its own costs, is the government likely to know those costs? Probably not, right? Third, we need to know the size of the externalities. In this case, we said it was 2 cents per unit of power. Is it? I don't know. And to be realistic, neither does anyone else. At least no one knows this perfectly. No one knows the exact cost of environmental harm and so on. But all of those things the government would need to know in order to decide that that was the right size for the power plant, a 100 megawatt power plant. But it gets worse, because if any of these things change, the amount of the externality, the cost to the producer, the demand for power, if any of these things change, then suddenly we've got a new optimal size for a power plant. If, for example, the price of power went up to just 8 cents per kilowatt hour, well then there is our new socially optimal point, right? A 200 megawatt power plant. And so it's really, really hard for the government to get this right. We shouldn't be too upset about governments not being able to do this, because this is a genuinely hard problem to solve.